Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Let's go. Let's laugh. We are imperfect after all.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast.
I'm Leanne Camilleri.
And I'm Lisa Downs. As hosts of the Imperfect Us podcast, we share relatable stories that celebrate we are all perfectly imperfect humans leading perfectly imperfect lives. We discover practical and evidence-based strategies that draw on the science of wellbeing and positive psychology that help us to uncover the barriers that might hold us back from being our authentic selves and turn them into opportunities so that we can show up more consistently, doing what we really aspire to do and who we want to be.
We acknowledge the Wadawurrung and the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the beautiful lands on which this podcast is being recorded. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to other First Nations people who are here with us today. So, let's get started. Hey everyone, Lisa's in Beijing and unable to join us, but stay tuned to the end where she'll join us for the wrap-up. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of talking to Dr. Matthew Iasiello. Matthew is an award-winning mental health and wellbeing researcher and focuses on translating the science into real-world applications. He is affiliated with the University of Adelaide and the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, also known as SAMRI. His PhD at Flinders University focused on the evidence and implications of the dual Continuum model of mental health. We're so excited to speak to him, so let's dive on in. Thanks so much for joining us today, Matt.
Yeah, no problems at all. Glad to be here.
We would love to hear about what inspired you to pursue a career in wellbeing research and how your journey has evolved over time.
Yeah, thank you. I've fallen backwards into it a little bit, to be honest with you. We're both from Adelaide. I was working in a lab, basically, in SAMRI, which is the South Australian Medical Health and Research Institute, which was a big new thing that was just opening up, basically, just as I'd finished my uni undergrad and honours. And so this flash new building opened up in the middle of the city, and I was there working and was probably not 100% satisfied with the work that I was doing. It was very focused on the side effects of antidepressants and these sorts of things. And I was feeling a bit like this is not necessarily the most preventative, which is what I would probably prefer more of. And I was in a lab room with 50 rats and stuff like that, which is I'm much more of a people person than a rat person, to be fair. Basically was working away and this new team opened up in SAMRI, which was all focused on mental wellbeing promotion. And I thought this was much more for me and I was able to jump across. And since then, for a couple of years, I really worked across lots of different projects. So it wasn't very research focused in those early years, was really about delivering wellbeing training and skills training across lots of different sectors of the state. So we had a really large project with at-risk young people where we partnered with youth agencies in the north and the south and in the hills to try and upskill staff and get these wellbeing skills distributed. We worked in aging, we worked in the prisons, we worked in workplaces. So that was a really good foundation for seeing what resonates with people and what doesn't. And then I started to realize there were some gaps in the research world that were really commonly coming up in all these projects that we were working on, which was, I guess the inspiration to then start a PhD and to make that very translational, meaning making it something that would be quite useful for the very practical work that we did.
The work that they do down there at SAMRI, it is incredible, and what a rich learning ground for you to leverage from. So I guess one of the first things that we learn in wellbeing science is that wellbeing means different things to different people.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know, what does wellbeing mean to you?
That's a research project that we're currently undertaking. And again, the same thing I've said it a few times in different places, but I do feel like this very practical work, being on the coalface really with the real world, quote unquote, was really valuable. So when we started, our work started from what was called the Seligman residency. So Martin Seligman came to South Australia and as part of this Thinkers in Residence program, as you may have been involved in or aware of. I'm not sure, Leanne, but as a result of that, this center was formed that I joined. And so PERMA was a big part of what we were talking about. We were using PERMA as a model to describe across these various parts of community what we mean by well-being. But again, it was useful in the sense that it's very straightforward. It does give you a nice answer to what, if someone says, what is well-being, you can answer it in 30 seconds. But it's not the whole picture, really. And I think we got a lot of people from different walks of life saying, there's a bit more to it than that, though, isn't it? And then you delve into all the different well-being models that are out there, and you start to realize that they're all 60% the same, but then there's differences in different models. They're partially overlapping. It becomes very confusing. And so that was, again, this kind of inspiration to set up a series of studies where we get to the bottom of what are we actually talking about, basically. And so I'll have a really good answer to your question in a little while, basically, in a couple of weeks or months. But what we did was we investigated what are measures of well-being actually measuring. We found 155 different measures of well-being, which is basically completely ridiculous. And they all said that they were measuring 400 different things. But then you look at that list of 400 and there's like positive emotion and positive affect and happiness and vitality and energy levels and lots of sort of synonyms. So we went into these measures and said, what are the similarities? And we thematically got them down to about 20 different unique sort of themes, which we've, in a couple of different studies, then pulled out the questions and tested them and run them by expert opinion to a set of 19 different dimensions. And there would be nothing that's probably surprising to you or to anyone else in the sort of the well-being space. But what's nice is that by doing what's called a Delphi study, where we've got people, experts from around the world, to basically vote and reach consensus, we basically ask them, how important or essential is this to well-being? For example, happiness, calmness, vitality, self-acceptance, meaning and purpose, the list goes on, belonging, whatever. They then reached consensus where they agreed that these 19 dimensions were important, and then they excluded a bunch as well. That work was actually for the Department of Health in Victoria, and so there'll be a report of that coming out soon, and we'll publish papers on that too soon. Not to say this is our team's model or just yet another model. The idea is, can we start speaking the same language? Because, like you said, well-being is unique to everyone. What we'd love to see is that if these are the puzzle pieces, these 19 dimensions, or potentially even more, obviously going forwards, these are the puzzle pieces, but they're not all relevant to all people. So if we think about something like health, there's lots of indicators of health. No one says, this is your health metric, your score out of 10 for your health. There are lots of different indicators, and different indicators are relevant at different times. Bone density is really important for 80-year-olds, but probably not that important for 4-year-olds. So it's about choosing the right indicators for the right moment. And I think the same is probably true for our well-being, which is where I'd love to see the space go, is to say something like self-acceptance. That might be really important in teenage years. I don't know. I'm just making this up. Really important in teenage years. Maybe it doesn't matter so much when you're 40. Like this idea of, let's make really age and demographic sensitive combinations of these indicators.
I can see how that would be so beneficial. When I first learned about PERMA, for example, to me that was a revelation. Wow, this just makes
100%.
sense.
Oh yeah, it was like that.
And it's so wonderful. I think as well, people in the wellbeing space, we forget that just learning about that was quite a pivotal moment. But I hear what you're saying about the different stages of wellbeing, because 10 years ago would have been very different to now. If I think about my own focus on my health is very different now to what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the questions that you might ask a middle-aged woman in comparison to a teen would be very different, for sure.
Exactly. And so this kind of, it's not that anyone ever probably says this is the model and it's true for everyone. And it's, no one ever really says that, but it's how we act, because we say, this is my model and I just use it everywhere I go. So it's just getting to that next level of clarity and nuance, I think.
Looking forward to learning more about that when your research findings come out. It'd be wonderful to learn more.
Yeah, thank
Was there ever a moment throughout your research that changed the way that you see well-being? And with this in mind, is there any myths with well-being that you would like to debunk?
That's a good question. I think my answer, there'd probably be a few answers, but I think just the focus on habits has been massive for us. So a lot of our training is still around well-being skills and well-being promotion. But I think, and thanks to the addition into our team of Van Achteren, who's been my colleague for a long time, he really came with a very behavior change kind of lens and experience. And so to go from saying we had a program where we said, here's 10 skills that are useful, and it was kind of like, off you go, you'll figure it out. Again, we didn't say that obviously, but that was implied in a sense of we'll give you 10 skills. They're all useful, they're all valuable, they're all evidence-based. Now to a different program that we've been testing and working on with a range of different collaborators to say, actually, we're going to give you a lot of different potential interventions, but we need to work out what's going to work for you and then build them into habits. Because I think then going to your question about the myths being that well-being is just something that happens to you, or that it's outside of your control, or that it's so heavily weighed by your personal circumstances. And of course, those things are true. But there's also something quite demystifying, I think, about just being very intentional with the well-being practices that you build into your life. So the example of like brushing your teeth, that's a classic example of habit formation. The idea that like, yes, there are things outside of your control that would influence the health of your teeth, like the water supply or the food supply. But actually, you also do have some agency, and you do create habits to improve that aspect of your health, which is obviously brushing your teeth. And so, in the context of things that are outside of your control, building this focus on habit formation, I think, has been really valuable, not only for the sort of the success of our programs, but just for helping people to demystify and empower themselves, basically, when it comes to their mental well-being.
The work that you do explores the dual continuum model. Could you explain the model and how it helps us to understand well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, going back to that coal face, we had this kind of idea that when we were going into workplaces or different settings, we were very clearly saying we're not replacing the work of psychologists. This is for mentally healthy groups to improve their well-being. It's not about fixing or treating mental illness. We're taking the general population and improving their well-being. But then we started measuring distress, right? And as you can guess, you go into any workplace in any setting in Australia or basically in the world, and there is no sort of general healthy population, right? There is distress everywhere that you go. So that really opened up our thinking of, it's not really true what we're saying, that basically we're taking this kind of middle ground group and trying to improve their well-being, because that's just not the reality of mental health. And so that did lead us to start investigating this thing called the dual continuum model of mental health, which is researched by Professor Corey Keyes in the US. And it basically suggests that rather than thinking about mental illness and mental well-being as opposite ends of the same spectrum, which is what we so often do, we think of it like a number line from -10 to 10, and you're somewhere between mental illness at -10 or well-being at 10. And rather than thinking about it like that, it actually treats them as two separate concepts. It's often drawn as a quadrant, like an x-axis and a y-axis sort of thing, where you can be high or low in well-being, high or low in distress. And so it was the focus of my entire PhD, basically, because it has some really significant implications for thinking about mental well-being. And there are people that disagree with the dual continuum model, and we can get into that a little bit if you'd like, and just pull me up if it's getting too nerdy. But basically, the idea is that your level of well-being is related but separate from your level of distress. And so that has a couple of big implications straight up. The first is that it would then mean that it's possible to experience or improve your level of well-being, or experience high levels of well-being with a mental illness. which is quite a revelation in a sense that if all you've ever done is think about mitigating or reducing your symptoms, it actually gives you like a more hopeful outlook that there are actually other things you could be focusing on. And again, it's that if you talk to any clinical psychologist, they are working as if this is true. They are trying to build agency and connection and hope and identity and meaning and purpose, all the things that we call well-being. They're already trying to do that. So it's not this black and white of we've totally missed the thing. It's just that systematically we don't act as if the dual continua is true. But the second sort of implication is that there's this group of people who have a low level of well-being but wouldn't be diagnosed with a mental illness. And so that group of people are very easily overlooked because they don't come up on any screenings or any distress measures because they don't have distress, but they have their own sort of unique form of suffering, which is what Keyes called languishing. And so we know that this group of people are somewhere between 4 and 8 times more likely to develop a future mental illness. And in my mind, very easy to imagine. Like we know that it's quite common, somewhere around 20% of Australians, I think, will land in this category where, don't necessarily have direction in life, aren't that satisfied with how things are going, don't feel control over their life, aren't a part of a community or a group that resonates with them. Not necessarily that they're experiencing all the symptoms of a mental illness, but it's like I say, it's their own sort of unique form of suffering. And so that I think is very easy to imagine if you think of just people in your life for whom life is not going as they might have planned.
The Continua gives us a real visual and helps to see where I'm at. Am I really struggling? Am I feeling like I'm really thriving? Am I feeling good, but also having other stuff going on behind the scenes? I'm waving my hands at the back of my head, stuff going on the inside, but I'm showing up with an element of control, if that's the right way to put it, of my well-being. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, no, definitely. And the truth is that it probably is more or less true depending on like different mental illnesses. For example, like the place where this gets the most pushback is depression. And that's because so often the symptoms of depression overlap as the sort of the opposites of mental well-being. If you think of something like happiness and unhappiness, basically, purpose versus purposelessness. But it is a subtle difference there. And it's something that we really want to start being able to pull apart more effectively when it comes to measures, because like I say, it does come down to how you define these things. And like we just said before, there is not really a consensus definition. And so getting to this place where we can have measures of well-being that quite effectively differentiate where you might be in those kind of quadrants that you're alluding to will be really important going forwards.
Thank you for that. Matt, imagine that we're in your lab right now and we're not messing around with the rats. Let me tell you, my son had a pet rat and I actually learned a lot about pet rats, that they're actually quite intelligent.
Yeah.
But jokes aside, imagine we're in your lab and you're helping us understand a bit more about well-being. What practical strategy would you be sharing for us to enhance our mental health in daily life?
There's a go-to exercise that we always bring up, I think, basically any presentation we do, because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to practice and people love it, which is the other side of things, right? You actually have to enjoy these things. I think in our program, we've got this awesome slide and I can't take credit for it. I think, again, it was actually you that came up with it, but it's a picture of a kid like with a broccoli in front of their face going, oh, I don't want to eat the broccoli. And because the idea is the things that are healthy for us don't often come in the forms that we like it. So we've all experienced of getting kids to, or being the kid trying to be forced the healthy food. But if you put it in a format that you like it, then obviously you eat it much more. And this activity, which is really fun, it's called Meaningful Pictures. And the idea is basically that with the negativity bias, if people have heard of that in the past, this idea that We notice threats and challenges and negatives much more than we notice positives in life. We're getting our balance between the resources in our life and the challenges that we face a bit. We're artificially tipping the scales in the wrong direction because all we're doing is noticing the negatives. And so it's a nice activity to connect with the resources that we have in our life. Not like toxic positivity kind of thing of just like, "Oh, just be happy," but actually, what are the things that you probably overlook and take for granted? And so the way we do the activity is we pull out your phone, just scroll through the last 10 or 20 photos that you've taken or that someone has sent to you, and look for sources of meaning and purpose. And so why that's so powerful is that I think you start to realize there are all these things that I've got. I do take them for granted. They often don't cost anything. They often don't take up any of my time. Like, they're the things that I actually love. And they're resources for you to lean on, just either to get the most out of life, or secondly, to deal with tough times. And that comes from a lot of Michael Steger's work in the US. And I think he even had a LinkedIn group, which was very similar to this idea that came up. And we've basically loved this activity, and it's so popular. It's just screamed in our face, like we can't ignore it basically, because people just enjoy it so much. And we've actually been a part of designing a campaign in Tasmania for mental health literacy or mental wellbeing literacy. And Meaningful Pictures has basically been the backbone of that entire campaign. This idea of checking in on where are places that are meaningful to you, what are things that you do, the people that you have in your life, activities for growth, activities for calmness. Take photos and just connect back in. And I think some of the evaluation has been so powerful where people say, firstly, I've never actually thought about what's important to me. Like, I have a blurry idea, but I've never actually sat down and thought about it. And secondly, like, half of the things that they either take photos of or that they find photos of were things that they've probably treated as optional luxuries, when actually it's the stuff that makes you healthy. So this idea that some of these things in a stressful moment or when I'm down, they're the first thing that I actually ditch out of my day or out of my week, when actually it's the thing I need the most. So
Yes.
this perspective shift of how do I actually bring more of this stuff into my life? And so we do this in some of our sort of short courses as well. And something that comes up all the time, which I really love, is people might say, "Oh, what was your photo?" "My photo was a catch up with some my old school friends," or whatever. And you go, "That's awesome, but how often do you do that?" "Probably every 6 months." "Do you want to do more of that, maybe?" Like, this idea of actually planning intentionally, what is it that you want in your life? And
Mm.
if I ask you, Leanne, what's important to you? What's the meaning of your life? That's a hard question to answer. But you've got this cheat sheet in your phone already, which is all the photos that you've taken and sent to each other. So
I
that would
love
be my
that.
answer.
Thank you. And I love that. And I was most fortunate to do the Be Well Co training.
Oh, I didn't realize.
And I did that exercise. And I remember when I did that at the time, ironically, the picture that I pulled out was in Tasmania. And it was at a location where my husband and I had visited. And just looking at that picture was a beautiful memory of walking through what felt like an enchanted forest. But the meaning behind that was the adventure. I enjoy his sense of adventure. It fires me up a bit. And that time together.
Yeah.
And really loved that. And yeah, I I just thought that was so ironic that you're doing that work
Yeah, there you
in
go.
Tasmania,
Yeah,
and
yeah, there
I
you
had to
go.
tell you about that. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely easy to take nice photos in Tasmania, that's for sure.
yeah, and I think if I just step back a little bit also, and just I think it's important to touch on that wellbeing literacy. We talked earlier in our conversation about wellbeing means different things to different people and in different contexts, and I guess having that perspective or everyone being on the same page with whatever that is for
Yeah,
that
yeah.
dynamic or that group or whatever is really important. So I guess you have that something that you're all working towards with an understanding of what that is. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And We often use the example of the gym. Like you walk
Yes.
into the gym and there's lots of exercises you could do. No one tries them all, right? You make a plan of what exercises that you'll enjoy that are aligned to your goals, that will help you within that are realistic for you. Like you're not going to start, I don't know, squatting heavy weights if you've got a bad knee or something. You do something that's
Yes.
going to be safe for your knee. So you could say all those people in that gym are all working on the same thing, but they're doing it in different ways. And so that's the analogy of that idea of we're all working towards this idea of well-being, but what that actually looks like is up to the individual.
As the world evolves, and it feels like we're going full steam ahead at the moment, doesn't it? We're really moving forward. The use of technology and well-being is increasing, and I'm noticing a lot more. I think Chat GPT is.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like that. What are your thoughts around this as this increases? What potential benefits and drawbacks do you see?
Yeah, I don't have like super radical ideas around this stuff, to be honest with you. It's not, I'm personally pretty old school in my mentality with some of these things. So uh, it's interesting when it comes to like social media and mental health, there is a discussion around what are the benefits, what are the unhealthy aspects of it. It's interesting that Patrick McGorry, who's our sort of leading mental health spokesperson slash researcher slash clinician slash lots of different things. He just recently published this massive paper in The Lancet about what he calls mega trends that are affecting youth mental health. And really interestingly, they came to the conclusion, it was him and about 50 co-authors, that social media was not necessarily one of those mega trends. And a lot of people will point to lots of benefits that do come from social media. So, for example, I know you weren't just talking about social media, but the
No.
idea that like nothing is only good or bad.
Yes.
And ideally, we would get to the point where we understand what the downsides and the risks are so that we could mitigate them so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, basically. And so that's my mentality for all things to do with technology. The only other thing I would add is that when it comes to technology being seen as a very easy band-aid or a cost-effective way, it's often the case that the costs are low, but the effectiveness is also very low too. And so
Yes.
that would be like not all the time. Sometimes you go, oh, do we really need to do that thing in person? Why don't we just make it a 5-minute Zoom? And actually, it comes down to the understanding of why did something work. Often, if it's a 1 hour catch up, it's actually the fact that you got to see each other and speak face to face and whatever it might have been, rather than the content of whatever it was you were
Yes.
speaking about in that hour. And so if you just give the content without the other stuff, then you've actually lost the actual sort of active ingredient.
I'm so with you on that. And of course, each have their place. But I know for me, I come alive in face to face. I think when we're in a forum where we can feel that vibe,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
vibe when we come together. And
100%. And it's the same. So we're doing a program with some of our SAMRI collaborators, which is delivering wellbeing, like the Be Well plan to people living with cancer.
right.
And for example, technology enables us to deliver that from our desks to anyone in the country. And people who are in remote and rural areas, people who are potentially immunosuppressed, so they don't want to be necessarily going into
Yes.
busy spaces. So it does enable all of these things. And that, to your point about like the vibe and the magic of being in the room, I fully agree with that. And so that's a good example of us trying to say, we're going to do this online, but how can we make sure that we try and bring some of that beauty of being face to face into the online world? So we have lots of
Yes.
breakout rooms and opportunities for sharing. as if you were sitting around the table,
Yes.
where you have a bit of privacy compared to the rest of the group. So trying to bring some of that into the tech world, I think is really important.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. Which daily habit or practice do you draw on? We like to share with our listeners wellbeing habit and the people that we're talking to, what they use most in their wellbeing.
For me, very practical one, I think, is coming home and we're talking about habit formation, this idea of attaching what it is you want to do to something that you already do. So this idea of coming home, I put my key in the front door and I just try and take 3 deep breaths. The idea being like, just leave the work stuff at the door, come in as who I want to be, which is not often who I do walk in the door as, because you're still like in a half thinking about emails, or I got to quickly send that thing to that person or whatever. And it's just walk straight past my kids, which like an idiot. It's not who I want to be. So this idea of just like taking that what does it take? 10 seconds, doesn't cost anything. That's pretty powerful. The other one for me is like reading and growth. I think that's really important to me as well. So trying, particularly for me, again, this is for me, like spiritual reading on those sorts of topics and growing in that life is really important to me. So that's something I try and do in the morning and night.
Lovely. Thanks so much for sharing that. Matt, as we're coming to the end, I've just got a couple more questions. What emerging trends in wellbeing research are exciting you most at the moment? And where do you see the field heading in, say, 5 years' time?
I think it's a really good question. I'm really excited, I think, about the meeting of the different minds kind of thing, like this idea that the different disciplines that have had some say in well-being are all starting and truly now, I think, to come together. So it's not, and I think it's a bit of a problem in a sense for positive psychology because like I used to think that I said this to a friend the other day. I used to think that the word positive was the problem with positive psych because it was like separating itself from the rest of psychology. But now I almost feel like the problem is the not the positive, the psychology, because it's now separating itself from the rest of the disciplines. Not that it ever does that, but the idea of I probably prefer that term of well-being science.
Yes.
Because that is truly what we're starting to see, I think, is economics and philosophy, medicine, sociology, theology, all of these worlds overlapping and bringing their unique perspectives into the one place, because I think that's what's quite sorely missed. So that's probably most exciting. But I think the Melbourne Uni's teams work on wellbeing literacy as well. I think that the couple of chapters and articles that Lindsay Odes and co have put out there, and there's a book coming soon, have been, I think it's a really valuable way for us to think about well-being because it does have kind of ideas of, like we've mentioned already, these ideas of capacity and autonomy and freedom, which I think is really interesting. This kind of idea of you know what's best for you in your particular context. And I think you must have read some of these chapters because I could hear it in some of the words you're talking about, the language that you were using. I think that's really a really interesting way going forwards. And it frees us up from quite a rigid way of thinking.
Yes, I confess my master's in post psych was done at Melbourne Uni.
Oh, there you go.
That whole wellbeing literacy was a strong focus for sure. Thank you so much. If you could recommend one resource, be it a book or a practice or a tool to our audience for enhancing their wellbeing, what would it be and why?
Could probably plug my podcast as well here, but
Yes, please do.
I don't know that I
I'll be
would
sharing
recommend
that in
it.
the links.
I don't know if I would recommend it for the resource. It's me talking to different researchers, so it's useful when it's useful, sort of thing. And that's called researching happy, I should say. I'm not sure. Like I'm not sure whether that I would probably recommend.
Is there something that you're enjoying at the moment?
My brother was actually just telling me about this book that I do want to read. I can't even remember the title of it, but I think It's called something like leisure is the basis of society or something like that. Like my
Okay.
brother, he's got all sorts of ideas, and I don't even know how he comes across these things, but it's something about the idea that we don't do enough to cultivate leisure. I think, and he actually, as we were talking about it last night over the dinner table, my wife was saying, like, I bet you the post-psych world has something like that, but they call it something else. And I said, I think it's probably play. I think that we're very utilitarian. Like everything needs to be done for a reason or for a benefit. And it's often for material things like if I read this book, maybe I'll get a promotion or I'll do this course because then it offers me these extra opportunities. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you do want to balance it probably with things that are just valuable for their own sake. And
Yes.
something I've been trying to do with my friends is we're all mostly dads now and mid 30s and don't do that much exercise. So like we tried to say, can we just catch up once a week and just play casual soccer amongst ourselves? Don't go in a league, don't go anything competitive. Just we hire out like a little basketball gym and we play soccer. And like to set it up, it was actually more of an uphill battle probably than what I imagined because everyone is trying to do the right thing. Go home and help with kids, help with dinner. I wasn't very popular with a couple of partners because the only time I could book was 6 till 7. So I was like smack on top of dinner time. So that was not probably great for their well-being. But ironically, like the thing was like people, this is just anecdotal, but my friend saying, oh, this is my interpretation anyway. Them saying, I don't know if I can make it because I'm trying to do the right thing of being home for dinner, but it's actually your partner probably actually wants you to do that. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Because it's actually good for you. And I did
yes.
notice it for there's a lot of research now on new dads that you don't take that much time for yourself actually. And
Yeah.
so that idea of play, I'm fully with you on that. And
Yeah.
it's been probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks we've done it in a row now and having a great time.
That's so great. And isn't it funny? You can fall into that trap of trying to appease everybody with a young family. You have responsibilities, and with work, you have responsibilities. I guess when you think about, oh, that soccer, it probably lights you up inside. Yes, you probably remember how good it feels to run around, chase the ball. Obviously, I don't know anything about soccer,
Me neither.
but and you can have that struggle inside of, oh, I really should be home helping with the kids, but I know that'll light me up. If you can find that balance in some way, you just show up even better
Yeah,
because you've had your bucket filled as well.
100%. And it does go back to the habit stuff of what are the challenges that you can foresee? I've got 3 little kids at home, and so dinner time with one parent down it presents its own challenges, but it's what can we do to make this less of a bumpy ride? Can we make sure that dinner's something that's already cooked before I leave? What are the sort of activities that we could be doing to make this habit feasible? Because if
Mm.
it's like I'm walking out the door and there's 3 kids screaming and what dinner's not ready or it's not cooked or it's not planned, this is not a feasible thing to me for me to be continuing. And it's not me obviously meeting the values and the responsibilities that I set for myself. So how can we actually work as a team, basically as a couple, to make sure that this is actually something that we can be practicing long term?
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of our podcast. And of course, we will be sharing the link to your wonderful podcast, Researching
Yeah,
Happy,
appreciate it.
and also information of how people can contact you. But just quickly, if they did want to contact you, where would be the best place to find you?
Yeah, to be honest, LinkedIn is the best place to find me, I think. And the other place is Be Wellco. So that's the thing I haven't probably mentioned. If you don't mind, I'll just give it a bit of
Of
a plug
course.
now. So
Yeah.
the idea for us always is that, like when we were at Samri, that research funding is hard to come by, whoever you are. It's even harder if you do mental health research, and it's even harder again, nearly impossible, it feels like, when you do preventative mental health, because there's just not that much funding allocated to that kind of work.
Mm.
And so we always had quite a commercial aspect to the work that we did because it was about selling training as a service that could then subsidize our research. And so eventually we actually spun out as a company from SAMRI. We were owned by SAMRI still, so it was a company owned by a charity. And then we've actually just been acquired by the kids' cancer charity called Camp Quality.
Wow.
And so we are called Be Wellco and now have a national presence because we merged with an organization called Orange's Toolkit, which was under the umbrella of Camp Quality. So you can find a lot more about the work that we do. The website is bewellco.io. So yeah,
Wonderful.
really cool stuff going on there too.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks for the invitation.
Lisa, what did you think of that conversation?
Oh, I loved it, Leanne. He is one of the most amazingly humble people I think I've met. Just the way he speaks and how he communicates is just
Yeah.
phenomenal. I think what stood out for me from the very beginning was that he discovered that he was much more of a people person rather than the rat in the science lab. And I thought how good of him to be able to do that, to really acknowledge who he was and
Yeah.
then shift his mindset into what research looks like for him. And when he explained that he explores the science of mental health, well-being, promotion, working from different perspectives, like when we were talking about the aging and the populations, but even working with people in prisons and different contexts, then enabled him to explore what does well-being mean in different places for different people, different contexts. I think that was such a great start for me.
Yeah.
What about you, Leah?
Agreed. I'm really excited to learn more about his current research. I was really interested in during our conversation when we were talking about the wellbeing measures and the foundations of wellbeing, and he said there was like 155 different measures with 400 different things that had similarities and how they narrowed them down. And as I've thought about it, I think that's something that as wellbeing researchers we come to understand is that it's all kind of the same but different in many of the foundations of wellbeing. And that's not a criticism, it's just different things can mean similar things as well. So it'll be interesting to see the puzzle pieces that he described, which ones are relevant for different periods or phases of life, different people, and how that aligns with his wellbeing continua as well.
I think that was another really big aha moment, that he's really exploring, like Corey Key's model, from flourishing to languishing, where we're at. But it's okay. Certain times of where you are, whoever you are, things are different, but you can have mental health and well-being at the same time. It's about how we get to know who we are, that's going to what it is that we need at that time, within that context, within that situation. And there are different ways of how you might respond to a certain intervention would be very different from me. I also really like the importance of the wellbeing literacy to explore in different contexts, as even where you live, where you learn, where you grow, because wellbeing means something different to everyone. And so when you're in a context, how do you define wellbeing as a group, as a collective, and how do you agree on the definition for your context? Or if it's just an individual thing. And I think that's really important, that we explore what the literacy is. And I know for me in Beijing is that they have the most beautiful language that explains it in the Chinese culture. It is fascinating. So wellbeing literacy is not just one language, it's a lot of languages, but when you work together collectively to define that for your context, anything's possible.
Yes. And I think that's the thing. It's getting on the same page as everyone. That context that you speak about is just for us in this setting, this moment, this is what we're working towards with wellbeing, or this is how we understand wellbeing. And that way we're all going in the same direction.
Yeah. I also like the trans languaging. So I think of where I am now from a Western perspective and then an Eastern perspective, and how that can join together, because often they're very related, but it's a different language. But how you
learn and listen from each other is such an important thing, to be able to come to that consensus of, that is the same as that, that's the same as that. So yeah, I love speaking with Matthew and looking forward to finding out more about his research too.
Yeah. All right. Bye for now.
Bye for now. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Imperfect Us podcast. As always, we are extremely grateful to our executive producer, Brenton Ainsworth, for helping us to put this episode together. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you care about, and we would be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes. To continue the conversation and see what we're up to, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Just search for Imperfect Us. Bye for now.